Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on February the 5th, 2013. For newcomers, I always suggest at the beginning of the broadcast, rather than pester you all the way through, to go into cuttingthroughthematrix.com and you'll find lots and lots of audios for free download. You'll also find transcripts on all these sites listed for print up too of the talks I've given over the years. And if you go into Alan Watt Sentinel.eu, you can find transcripts in other languages to choose from. But remember too, you are the audience to bring me to you, because I've got no personal stake in any corporations or businesses or anything like that. I don't get backed by advertisers or paid by anybody for doing this. So it's up to you, the listeners, to help me just creak along here. And it's creaking at the moment, actually, with inflation and all the rest of it. To bring you these stories, because it's very, very important to get a different push and view on things as to what's really happening in the world, in the big, big picture. Although you can't go into every detail because some of them are verboten, basically, in this day and age. But I do my best to give you lots of information as to what's really happening, where it's all going. I go through the history of the organizations that at least came to the fore in the early 20th century, late 19th century, in fact, and formed big, giant, charitable foundations, they call themselves, private organizations that would be a parallel government when all work together to bring in their own kind of world order, obviously funded from the beginning by the big international bankers because their names are all mentioned in it, and they lent to countries. They weren't your little sort of corner store or corner street bankers. And they knew they could hire armies of non-governmental organizations that would persistently lobby governments. They could also put their own guys in Parliament and in Congress and even across the whole world in all their politics, which they have done. They've actually selected prime ministers and presidents for about 100 years now, I suppose, according to Quigley, who was their own personal historian. They do have a personal historian that comes from foreign relations. And he had access to their records, and he was all for their agenda too. So I go into their big plan to take over the world's resources, how they would see humans. They already saw humans as human resources, were natural resources that replenish yourselves, quite cheap for you to take care of, basically. In fact, you don't have to put any outlay on them at all. And once they've taken all your Medicare away, you'll have no outlay at all. It's all profit from you. That's your job. To serve the system, to obey the system, to produce and consume and pay taxes. And the United Nations has said too that if you're not a producer and consumer, then you're a bad citizen, a world citizen. You're not a good one. So that's why they're going for the elderly now as well, to try to grab all their pensions and to get them the cyanide pill, basically, rather than simply allowing them to die in their own time. And it's much, much cheaper that way, according to all the experts at the top. They call themselves bioethicists, which is the new name for eugenics and eugenicists. So help yourself to the audios and the information I've put up there. Remember too, you can donate to me, or you can buy the books and discs at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And from the US to Canada, personal checks are still good, as are international postal money orders from the US to Canada. You can send cash or use PayPal. Across the world, you've got Western Union, MoneyGram, and PayPal. As I say, straight donations are awfully seriously welcome. But you're going through the great transitions. They always give names to the big changes. You got the New Deal when they put in FDR, and they did put in FDR because they collapsed the banks then too to cause a crisis, which it did, to change the system. Before that, they caused 3 bank crashes in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. In order to get the Federal Reserve put in, that was going to be the solution to it. And of course, their solution is always to further their own agenda, not to help you at all. And we've seen the outcome of that. Now, the music's coming in, so we'll be back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt. We're cutting through the matrix, talking about the system as it really is, and the stage we're at now, of course, it was planned probably 50 or 80 years ago, was when you go through the great transition. They call the 21st century the century of change, and this was talked about in the last century by all those in high academia. This was to be the century of change, and it was the changes that they wanted to bring through for a long, long, long time. for a global society, global governance by experts and all the rest of it, and replacing all religions, almost all religions, one is different, and also immediate obedience by the public, using psychology, neuroscience and so on to dominate the thoughts of the public via media, education and so on, which works awfully well. It's called scientific socialism, indoctrination, as Bertrand Russell called it, and he did have some of the first experimental schools back in the 1920s. So it works awfully well, and when you're indoctrinated, you don't know you are. In fact, you get vehemently angry when people come up with certain topics and contradict what you really truly believe, and you don't realize you've been taught to believe certain things by selected information, not by all information on any particular topic, but selected information. It can completely sway the way that they think about anything at all. And it's used in academia, it's used in your indoctrination at school, it's used through cartoons and even children's stories, because they get paid, actually, novelists, to bring in the politically correct updates and to put them in your novels. They actually get paid extra cash for all that. They have for as long as I've been alive. So this is ongoing all the time. And I've mentioned before, too, that I knew people in Toronto, for instance, who had clubs. There were clubs, really, like bars almost. And they were funded by the government, I found out, where a lot of musicians would go in and they had to sing very radical songs. And I thought, well, this is awfully like New York, the old village and all that kind of stuff where they're pushing communism. And I got talking to the people who ran it, and they said that they had to push radical songs for change because that was a government stipulation for the grants. They had to be for radical change. Now, radical change is a term that they used to use, but it's for the overthrow of all existing theories, ways of life, the family unit, culture, the whole thing. That's what it was all about. That's what radical change means. And your own governments have been paying these things since about the 1960s onwards, probably. I don't know how long they've been at it. Probably longer. And all countries that signed the United Nations treaties back in 1946 were all into putting money aside for pushing radical change. And the people, the general population, the masses, the herd as they're called, have no clue that there's a massive scheme to upset and change, radically change and destroy all that was to bring in the new system that was planned a long time ago. But many tricks are used, and crises are always used to get radical change through as well. Not just the plodding method on a social scene, but they also use wars. For instance, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and read Quigley's book, the Anglo-American Establishment, excellent book where he talks about how they set up this big foundation. They set up literally wars. They caused the Boer War. They brought it on, so that Britain would be forced to come in using their tax money and their troops to take over. And of course the big boys themselves who started the war would then have the diamond fields and the gold to themselves. But they didn't want to stop there. They wanted to take up for all the resources of the world. And it's still ongoing today. So everything can be explained if you know where to look. And again, you have to get outside the box, which is your indoctrination from school. To get through school, you have to basically be, at least if you've got intelligence at all, give them the answers they want to hear. They'll give you little gold stars, and they'll give you your quality approval stamp, that you're safe to go out into their workforce and work for them. If you're a real thinker, you have to disguise this, or you'll get drugged. If you have leadership abilities, you will definitely get drugged. That was back 100 years to bring this particular type of catching people at school. They would drug you. And that's happening today. And that was quite commonplace. And again, through good propaganda and massive media pushing all of the drugs and so on, and the necessity of drugging the children has been done and accomplished. Young boys generally can't sit in school for very long. They're not girls. Regardless of what's happening today with the big push in the scene, to me you're awfully confused. The fact is boys are not girls. And they tend to have more energy when they're young, and they jump around a lot and get rid of their energy. But now they want them to be just like the girls, and if they can't sit for an hour, 2 hours without fidgeting, they get them drugged, you see. If they ask too many questions, or they're contradicting the teachers because they've read something else, something along the way, they'll get drugged, you see. So be very careful in school for all the young ones who are listening to me. Be very, very careful. Because there really is an intense effort to find out who you are, if you're a thinker at all. And if you put things together, it's very dangerous, very, very dangerous time to be young.